All right. And I call the board meeting to order, last meeting of the school year. Roll call, Ms. Widener.
Dr. Campley?
Here.
Mr. Fountain?
Here.
Mr. Keenan?
Here.
Mr. Liggett?
Present.
Mr. McKinney?
Here.
Dr. Sadler? Mr. Saylor? Dr. Weston?
Here.
Ms. White?
Here. We will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silent reflection.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alrighty, so we will move along with the reading of the Perkiomen Valley mission statement. Mr. Lees, would you mind reading the mission statement?
Of course, I'd be happy to. The mission of the Perkiomen Valley School District is to cultivate an inclusive community of learners empowered to grow intellectually, socially, and emotionally.
Wonderful. 1.07, approval of the minutes as presented.
106.
I'm so sorry, every single time. 1.06, approval of the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Now we will approve the minutes. 1.07,
Move to approve the minutes.
move to approve the minutes for May 12th and June 2nd. Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. 1.08, special recognition was last week. 1.09, comments on any topic. Board affords the public an opportunity to comment on any topic for a duration of 3 minutes, and I open the floor. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to reports and presentations. Section 2, the Safe Annual Schools Report was presented on June 2nd. Brings us to the Student Liaisons Report. Mr. Lees.
Starting off, I'd like to once again congratulate the now graduated seniors and hope everybody enjoyed the ceremony. And then, of course, thank Dr. Russell and Miss White for being there. It was a beautiful ceremony, even though the weather was a little iffy, a little worried, but turned out great. And then first, I'd like to wish the girls varsity softball luck in their state semifinal game tonight. And then if they win, good luck in the state championship game on the 12th. I'd also like to invite everybody to participate or come and support the players in the Smash Valley Pickleball event on the 22nd at the high school tennis courts. All the proceeds will go to the Travis Manian Foundation and is sponsored by the Nova Lab program. And then lastly, finals have also begun for all high school students. So I'd like to wish everybody good luck and then hope everybody enjoys the last day of school on Thursday.
All good stuff. Thank you so much. President's report. I don't really have anything other than I hope everybody has a safe and happy summer. Well earned, no doubt, especially our high school students in this last week of finals. And moves us to the superintendent's report, section 2.04. Dr. Russell.
Thank you, Ms. White. And this week, I would just like to follow up with the superintendent's report, part 2. As I mentioned last week, in response to some of the questions really that emerged around the survey data. And I wanted to kind of put this information into context. When a survey like this is administered, we like to give the board a sense of some of the results. A flavor of the comments is how I described it last week. Really, this is work for our administrative team that they will dive into this summer. They'll review and analyze these data and the open-ended comments, and really then think about the goals or action steps they need to consider in response to what's reported. Now, when there are more serious comments that come from students, we certainly don't know which students presented those comments. They do their very best to address any of the needs, the challenges, the issues that might come forward through these comments. They take everything very seriously and really work to continue to nurture that culture in their buildings. So I'm not going to read everything, but I will let you know that there was some comparisons made to surveys administered last year and then maybe 2 years ago where the questions were similar. So you had a sense, you were provided this in advance. If you happened to read through it, you got a sense of how the data this year compared to last year or 2 years ago if it was a consistent question. And in some cases, we saw some improvements, and in other cases, we did not. So I'll go through the slides. They are here for your reference. They will be posted for the public. What's important to us, for example, on this particular slide from our staff, I feel like I belong in my school building. There's an improvement that we see. A greater percentage, a higher percentage of our staff do feel that way or are reporting that relative to years past. They're satisfied in their assignment. That was a pretty significant increase from last year, for example. What we see here around bullying, cyberbullying, that's been a topic of interest for us because students have brought it forward. We're aware that there are concerns. Whether it's bullying or it's negative interactions, we want them to stop. So we're working on that. A lower percentage of staff reported bullying among students as a frequent problem in their school relative to last year. The same with cyberbullying. From our parents, we received the perspective of parents regarding their children or child's perspective about their school situation. So again, their child feels safe at school. We saw some improvement, a sense of belonging, some improvement. Does your child's school effectively manage student discipline? About the same, but really a slight decrease. My child regularly attends and participates in events. That went up. My child has been bullied. That went down. That's good. We like to see that. We appreciate that. The staff at my child's school encourages students to respect each other's differences. That decreased. We would much prefer an increase there. So that's an area that we'll focus on with our staff based upon this parent feedback. Now, the other thing that was pointed out was really the response rate. We really had about a 10% response rate from our parents here. If I go back to staff, it was about 36%, as we noted last week. I didn't really highlight much of the students, but these responses are important in that we saw a decrease in whether or not students feel like they belong this year versus last year. They feel included, a decrease this year versus last year. So that raises questions for us and our administrators in their buildings, respectively, where we see that decrease. I've been bullied at my school. At the elementary level, that actually increased. Secondary, it remained the same. Again, this raises questions for our administrators. They will dive in deeper to try and learn more and figure out what's happening in the building that can change that outcome, change that aspect of the school climate and culture for our students, the behaviors of students that are resulting in these sorts of responses.
Dr. Austin?
Yeah.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
Could some of that also be that children are identifying bullying behavior differently than they have in the past and have become more aware and are identifying things more similar to like how we now identify other things more than we did before?
I would say that is a possibility because we talk about it more as we try to focus on it and change the behaviors when, again, we've talked about this as a board. The definition of bullying is very specific. And sometimes in our experience, the experience of our administrators, negative interactions are couched as bullying. And they may or may not actually qualify. It doesn't matter. They're negative. They don't feel good to our students. So our administrators take that seriously, whether it's technically bullying or just negative, disrespectful interactions. However, yes, I would say that is a possibility. Because we've really been focusing on it, talking about it more. It could be that that lends itself to what we're seeing here. Requires more work.
Dr. Russell, so as we compare the numbers year over year,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's helpful from a talking point standpoint, my concern is that we don't have the same pool of respondents year over year. So how, there's just not a way to tell, you know, if you were asking the same cohort, I think it would maybe be more true. Not that the numbers are not true, because the numbers reflect the experiences of those that took the survey, but
Are
I
you
just-
saying that behavior would basically follow the cohort? So you would want to
not
look at that
necessarily. Well, I
cohort?
guess part of it could be the cohort, yes. I think that sometimes you have a cohort, like a fourth grade cohort, then they become the fifth grade cohort, so then are they still experiencing the same problems? But you're just not, you know, it's grouped together. So 6 through 12, okay, it's 20% both times, and you do have a new section of kids in there, but like, does the 23, 24 number include all of the same kids as 24, 25? I would say probably not. Maybe
Well-
some kids didn't.
I think experiences and perspectives change as
Yeah.
students get older. So your data isn't going to, it isn't comparative in that you don't know the parents that are completing it this time may not have completed it last time.
I guess
So-
that's my point.
So it is
Yeah.
apples and oranges as far as who's completing it. Yes, it's PV community, but it may not necessarily be the same PV community from last time to this time. But it gives, again, it's that idea of flavor. It
Yeah,
gives
right.
a sense of how people are feeling. But in general, that's all it can be is a flavor. It's a very low rate of respondents overall when you think about how large the PV community is.
Right.
But it gives an idea and it gives a starting point to bounce more information off of. Because from here, if there's, say, an area that looks like needs more, some to delve deeper into, there could be focus groups where they go to a building.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
some of those questions, building names came up or whatever. That building could have focus groups of students and parents and faculty that then there could be more in-depth conversations to drill down a little bit deeper. So again, everything's like a springboard. It's never going to be, you know, a one stop. This is going to give us all of our answers.
I agree
But I
with that,
do
for sure.
think, but I think that's a good thing just to kind of put out there in the universe
Right.
that the perspectives and things.
And I say it
it's
more to
good
point
com-
it out than
yeah,
really to
it's good to compare, but we have to be careful in that.
in the comparison of an improvement. I guess that
Agreed.
was my point. Is that
Yeah, or
I
even
do-
a decrease.
or right,
Yeah.
right.
Even the respondents are self-selected because they are motivated
They have a reason to say something.
to respond.
For
So
sure.
right there, your sample is not necessarily representative
Right.
of the greater population.
Yeah, and I guess I say that more for just kind of on the record purposes, is to point out that, yes, it's a snapshot, yes, it's a flavor, but my concern really is that when we look at numbers like this, sometimes I feel like the information is taken a little bit out of context in the sense that it's not presented in a way that's to say that we don't have a problem or that we fixed the problem. It's just, again, a snapshot of
I think when you're
respondents
looking,
of that survey.
I think when you're looking at a general response like this, in most of the occasions when you have something, you're going to have those that are going to be very much opposed and those that are going to be very much in favor. A lot of those that fit into that mid 50% really don't necessarily respond.
Right.
They don't have as much of a need to. So I think that the idea is that you've got something, it's just something to work with. It's not going to give you anything that's concrete. It's just something to work with. But I do think that when you see numbers like, for instance, on the, let's see, where was it? I was looking at it a while ago. Yeah, I have seen students in my school being bullied. Elementary, it went from 42 up to 52. That's significant. So when you're looking at that, even though it may not be the same cohort, you're still looking at a significantly higher percentage.
Well, to Mr. Liggett's point, it could just be a heightened awareness of behaviors as opposed to actually an increase in incidence, which I would tend to
even
agree
there
with.
that particular question,
Right,
if in the cafeteria there was a instance of bullying
right,
and
Top
a
of mind.
significant portion of that school
Yeah.
saw that,
right. That's the
there
answer
goes
for
your
that.
number right there.
Right,
Right.
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 Well, and I guess I say that more along the lines of in agreement in the fact that this is just a snapshot. It just seemed as though, you know, I know Dr. Russell, you're presenting this as a part two, but I felt like the conversation last week insinuated that this was somehow more than a flavor, or that there was information somehow missing, or it was misguided. And I guess I was looking to have conversation about the acknowledgement that really these are the numbers that represent the responses, but it's not necessarily the whole picture.
Right, I would agree with that. I mean, it was with students that we really had most of our cohort respond. We had over 2,000 responses because we administered it here in school, so they didn't have much of a choice. They participated. But I would agree with Mr. Fountain that we surmise, whether it's correct or not, that parents and or staff sometimes respond when they want to have a voice about something. That doesn't mean that's always the case, but that is something we wonder and question about. Principals were given this survey data filtered for their buildings. So they're not working with the aggregate like we're seeing here tonight.
That's helpful.
They're working with their individual buildings, and the individuals are the cohorts in each of these stakeholder groups that responded. And that's what they'll dive into more deeply, to see what they can do. Again, this is one set of data among other sets of data that they look at and they consider as they work on nurturing a positive culture in their buildings. And I think we talked about the cohort difference moving from a 4-8, where you're combining those middle school students with upper elementary, versus 4-5, and then secondary, where we're combining middle school with high school, and the differences there that we could generate in some of the data points. So we need to think about that moving forward as we continue to administer and learn more about the culture and climate. But it is a way to get a sense, I keep using the word flavor, just to get a feel for what's happening. And all of the responses matter. So as we move through some of these comparative data, we also we used an AI tool. I don't know that I would agree with some of the summary statements or the themes that emerged. Again, each of our building teams, will dive deeply into the data for their school and really try to learn about some things and what they might be able to take some action steps in response to improve. But this gives you a sense of what an AI tool said when all of those open-ended statements were input into the tool. Some positive, some not so positive from each of our stakeholder groups. So you can read through those. So know that our principals take this very seriously, and they're curious about it. They're interested to know what people are saying about the experiences of their children, or what students are saying about their experiences, what their staff are saying. That information matters to them, so they take it very seriously. So stay tuned. There are times when we present some of these data in the data presentation in January as well, so you may see some of that come back. So we talked about end-of-year reporting. We'll update our equity action plan. We developed some tentative goals based upon some of the data that we looked at in the education updates. Some of those data have been updated as well to be a little bit more specific with some of the numbers based on questions last month. And we've set up this equity action plan. It's been in existence for several years now, and it exists as almost an admin reg connected to Policy 832. And we'll update where we're recognizing areas of focus based on the data that we review and some of the goals that emerge as a result of that. And you'll see some of those here. Major focus on some of our specialized groups, English language learners and special education students. Major focus on improving math achievement for all students as well as students in those specialized groups. So you can see some of that in some of these goals that have been drafted as a draft at this point by principals and administrators. There's about 10 of them. And then just to follow up on the more exciting aspect of the report, Ms. Amanda Gimber, who is a high school special education teacher, was actually voted the coolest teacher in response to the Preston and Steve contest and their announcement that Perkiomen Valley High School was up last week. So congratulations to her. She gets a little bit of, she gets to boast a little bit. She's cool. And that ends my report.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. Solicitor's report, Mr. Subers.
No report.
Wonderful, thank you. Board and district committee reports. As I mentioned last week, the committee meeting dates for next school year, beginning in August, are posted rather on the calendar as well as in the agenda. Correct?
Yeah, we're working on that.
Perfect. They will be there. Wonderful. So we will resume most everything in September with obviously finance in August as part of that meeting. Does anyone have anything else to add with regard to board and district committee reports? Okay. That brings us to section 3, consent agenda. I will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Consent agenda passes. Mr. McKinney, Education, Section 4.
Thank you, Ms. White. Okay, 4.01 was education updates presented last week. What's that? You have part 2? Okay. Dr. Russell will take the floor to give us an update.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. And in response to last week, we had some questions, and so Dr. Clune and I worked to try and update and provide you some additional data in the slides here. So I don't want to read every slide to you, but I'll highlight that this slide has been updated to show you a total or average for each of the buildings, average percentage of students attending school. This slide, there were some questions about which students we were actually talking about in the total demographic for these particular students based on race. So again, those numbers have been clarified here, and the total number that we're working from is also represented on the slide. So where there's been an updated slide, we've indicated that with a note at the bottom. So in this particular case, there were, if I go to Asian students, there were 17 students involved in 37 behavioral referrals. That represents 3% of the referrals. Demographically, Asians comprise 6% of students K-5. So that's how those data are presenting now. So hopefully there's some clarity for the readers.
Yeah, that's still some concern there.
Yeah, there's concern. So if you look at black students and the distinction there, the difference between the percentage of referrals based on the percentage of students total population comprised of blacks. So there's a difference there. So we need to dive into that. We need to ask questions about that. Why is that happening? On this particular slide, we looked at gender, and then we looked at gifted versus non-gifted students, and again, the number of students, the behavioral referrals, the percentage of the referrals based on the gender, and then demographically, the percentage that particular gender comprises of the total enrollment.
So Dr. Russell,
Yeah.
the only behavioral referrals were by those identified as non-gifted? There were 0 across all buildings?
That's correct.
K-5?
That's
Okay.
correct. Raised a question for us too, yeah. That's correct.
And so, just so we understand for the record, when these behavioral problems are documented in the system, I guess there's like a little questionnaire portion in the beginning of it to identify these different categories.
And when our administrators input the information, it goes into our student information system.
Oh, it ties to their number.
That's correct.
Okay.
And it goes into a state report that's required we submit, that reports suspensions each year.
Okay. So it attaches
or
to their
infractions.
it
That's
attaches
correct.
to their student number. So it's not as though I was going to say perhaps if someone's filling out the form manually and they don't know a particular identification, maybe it's skipped or something. But if it's attached to a student number, then that makes sense.
Right.
Okay.
The other thing to keep in mind is it's assuming that the infraction is recorded. So students, especially at like the elementary level, a lot of things are handled within the classroom and not every infraction gets recorded. And it really becomes at the discretion of the teacher, the administrator, and that's where my questions come into play with, are we ensuring that we're being fair in making sure that the infractions are being, the infractions for every child, if, say I threw the ball over there and that's not allowed and that gets put in the system, is that being put in the system for every child that throws the ball over there? Or is it just that one teacher puts it in the system for kids and the other teachers don't, or only certain students get it put in the system? I think that's where there needs to be, to ensure the consistency and fairness in what's being recorded too. I think that's something that I don't think a lot of people realize is not, it's in what's being recorded, not everything gets recorded.
And I think too, this is an example of where we can disaggregate the data and principals can look at their building data and what's been submitted in what used to be called the Safe Schools Report. They changed the name. It escapes me at this very moment, but it's not Safe Schools anymore. It's something different. They changed it this year. Again, we can disaggregate the data and look at what's happening at a building level, and then we can compare between East and West. We can compare from one elementary school to the other. Anything that warrants a suspension must be reported, and then select infractions must be reported to the state if they occur. So we see very few, to Dr. Campley's point, I agree with that. Overall, big picture-wise, we see many fewer infractions reported for elementary students in the elementary schools versus or as compared to middle school and high school, where those students tend to make more serious choices that end up being cited and in the report. Yes.
Because these programs, they cite everything from, so-and-so called out too many times.
Swiss, yes, that's correct.
to-
Swiss does, you're right.
They called out too many times to a suspension-worthy thing. So some people don't necessarily record they called out too many times to track it, where other people, so like that 216 referrals, it could be that 200 of them were those lower level incidents, and 16 of them were your higher level problematic state report worthy
Right.
incidents. So I think, that's the thing, some of the things that, again, when you're, this for us is just to give us a sense, but at your admin level and what you're doing behind the scenes, I'm sure, is to go through, tease it out, see. And I think a big one is, okay, why are gifted students not being reported? Is it because teachers are kind of saying, oh, we're just going to have a conversation with you? Not that they're not doing anything, but maybe they're just not getting recorded.
Yeah.
And are we, unfortunately, our Black population, are we over recording? Are they getting things recorded that maybe other people are not being recorded? And maybe these are not high level infractions, but they're getting maybe too many of the lower level infractions recorded that other people would just kind of be like, we had a conversation about it, we didn't put it in the system. So I think those are some things to kind of consider when we're looking to see why are we having this overrepresentation in one one group and underrepresentation in another group.
Right, and just to clarify, and I appreciate those points, completely agree. I mentioned Safe Schools report. This is Swiss data or Swiss referrals. These are connected to the positive behavioral interventions and supports, the frameworks that exist in each of our elementary and middle schools. This is K-5 data. This is not Safe Schools, so I apologize for that. The secondary data is connected to Safe Schools, and there is some elementary data that is submitted in the Safe Schools report at the end of the year. These data come from that Swiss system where, to Dr. Campley's point, they define minors, they define majors. But is there some relativity to some of those in the minds of our teachers? That's possible. And that's the exercise for principals, to make sure that we're all understanding the particular minors we might be citing or majors, and that we're doing so consistently.
I think a lot of this stuff in here is basically FYI, because I mean, we could talk about various different things all day long. It's not going to make any difference until it gets to the building level. You take a look and say, okay, who is it that is creating the issues? What are the issues that are being done? We're not getting any of that information. So everything that we're talking about right now is purely FYI and conjecture. So I think the building principals are the ones that are going to be needing to take the deeper dive into it to say, okay, what do I need to do? What do we need to look at?
I agree with Don on that. The other thing is, like, when you look at the numbers, especially, what leaps out to me is that the whole difference in genders and the reporting there. I mean, if you look at this, it seems, because we have 81% is male. There probably would be a point where we should say, hey, that's a bit of a problem, 80%. Whether that's a difference in reporting or a true difference in behavior. And I think it's good that we have numbers like this that can help us to tease out a little bit of what's actually there. Because otherwise, if you're just looking at the number, it's almost an indictment of the males.
Yeah, and I mean, we often say data doesn't always give us answers, it prompts questions, and those are good questions that emerge from data like this, that discrepancy, that difference.
But I do appreciate you bringing it and sharing it with the board, because it allows us to know what it is that you're diving in and working on behind the scenes, because while it doesn't give us answers, it lets us know, hey, these are areas that could be potentially problematic, and you're going to work with your team to figure out, okay, is this something that we should be concerned about in an area that needs to be worked on? Because right here, to me, it looks like it could potentially be an area of concern. But again, you're going to go and you're going to dive in and see why are these numbers causing some alarm? Why is there a red flag coming up on them? And then once you have some answers over the summer and you're doing your deep dive, you can come back and say, okay, we figured out it's one particular building, and we know that everything was being reported for every minor, I just appreciate having that transparency to know, because I think it's important information.
That's good to hear, and that was part of our goal. Policy 832 prompts us to look at some of these different data. We do that as well in the data presentation in January, and from that, we make recommendations to you for improvements or for resources that we believe will lend themselves to improvements. The same here, and as we really think about affording all students affording them educational equity or equitable experiences, these data are important. So our principals are, everything okay?
Yeah, I think there's something wrong with it.
Okay. So, helpful conversation. I'll wait, it's okay. Are you okay over there?
I think we're okay. I think everybody has power issues.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Mine's now on. Mine now says it's charging. So whatever you just did, Karthik, it worked.
One of them wasn't plugged in. Good.
Well done.
It's now working now. Mine now says it's working.
Well done. All right.
Sorry about
So if it's
Are you-
all
you
right,
have it- Does it work now?
that. Yes, it's okay to move on.
The
Yes.
thing is not
Thank you.
up there now.
My battery was almost done, so I was like, why is it not with that little, what's that little?
all right, so I won't,
Moving along.
again, yes, I won't belabor it, but here you see an example of the Safe Schools report. So it's a snapshot for secondary level students, the offender count and the percentage of total offenses, the age of these individuals, the grades they're in, their gender, their race, or whether they have an IEP or not. So again, similar data that you see, it's in aggregate form. We can disaggregate it and look at it for each of our buildings, and that's what our principals do. Here we looked at students in honors versus on-level or regular biology and English. And the question was, well, what's the size of the class? If we're looking at students that might participate in an honors, how big is the class overall? So that we have that comparison, and that number has been provided here on the right. 432 students in the current 10th grade class, and you can see how many took regular biology, how many took honors biology. Same with English. It was a similar comparison. These slides have been updated and noted that way. So we gave you the total number of students for that class and just picked out that particular example. So we look at who's taking the higher level, the more rigorous courses. And do we need to ask questions about who's in those higher level courses? Yeah.
Can you go back to that?
Yeah.
So for this one, for example, in the Honors English 10, gifted is 16, it says 16.1%. Is that of the class composition? Because it doesn't match the demographics for the cohort.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
I got
what
it.
it is.
I
It's-
understand.
yeah,
Okay. Okay. So the percentage is higher among the 217, but the overall demographic, okay, I understand.
And that's a good question, because what's included here is the gifted honors English classes. They were
Right.
pulled with the other sort
Right.
of regular honors classes.
Right,
So it would
understood.
make sense.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
And then to the right, you see
The overall
sort of the basic,
cohort.
right, overall for the cohort.
Yeah,
Right.
And then the special ed. So that would be someone that has an IEP, but would still qualify for honors and gifted honors English,
Right.
and or.
Either one.
Okay, got
and
it.
some students would have a speech IEP, some
Gotcha.
students are duly
It's
identified.
not always a learning,
Right.
a learning IEP, but that still falls under the education, the special education umbrella.
Right, that's
Okay,
correct. Yep,
Understood.
Yep. So again, interesting data, prompts sort different questions.
Like you said, yeah, right. Flip-flop statistics for male and female between the two. Interesting. Okay.
And then we had, these slides are the same as those presented to you last week. I'm not going to review those again. I just wanted to call out some of the updates. Here we actually included, so there was a question last week that Mr. Saylor happened to raise, as opposed to just that relative data. How is Perkiomen Valley doing relative to other schools in the county? What is the actual average percent proficiency our students are earning, or the percentage of students that are actually hitting that benchmark to score proficient or advanced? So this gives you that data. This is a new slide. This is ELA, this is math, and then we have science. So some of that more specific data as opposed to just the comparative data here. Same thing here. So what percentage of our students by race scored proficient or advanced? This is what this tells you. Relative to other schools like ours, based upon the percentage of economically disadvantaged schools in Montgomery County and schools statewide. So Perkiomen Valley has the highest percentage of students that score proficient or advanced versus each of these. Now, the percentage of Asian students is 90% for ELA. The percentage of blacks is 59, for Hispanics 54. So only 54% of that cohort, that subgroup, was able to score proficient or advanced versus the 90% of the Asian students that demonstrated the ability to do that. Again, the data prompts questions about the experiences of these different subgroups. Here's math. Math tends to be an area of struggle in general for the district. We continue to focus on that. And here we lose some ground relative to other districts or these other groups that we're comparing ourselves to. And this is a snapshot again of the action plan. We'll fill this in and then we'll update it with some of the work that we've done this year, some of the data we've looked at, and again, some of the focus areas and the goals or action steps that we wish to take in the different categories. So you can look for that connected to Policy 832. And that ends the updates to last week's education updates.
Thank you, Dr. Russell, for those updates. Moving on to 402, 403, 404, all are on consent. 405, action was taken last week for the approval of students eligible to graduate. 406 is action, needed action tonight, a request to approve the 2025-2026 parent-student handbooks for elementary, middle, and high schools, and I so move.
So motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries.
407 is on consent. 408 is on consent. 409 is the enrollment report. 410, approval to purchase career programming resources, and I so move.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries.
411, approval to purchase health module resource, and I so move.
Motion, is there a second? Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries.
And that is my section, Ms. White.
Thank you so much, Mr. McKinney. Dr. Weston, Section 5 Business.
Thank you, Ms. White. Item 5.01, the Finance Committee of the Whole report. Mr. Weaver, do you have anything to add to your report?
I have nothing to add at this time, thank you.
Very good. Item 5.02, 03, 04, 05, 06, and 07 are all on consent. Item 5.08 was removed from the agenda. Item 5.09, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19 are all on consent. Item 5.20, the approval of the confidential settlement agreements. This is a request to approve confidential settlement and release agreements in lieu of FAPE as recommended. Recommended action is a motion to approve, and I so move.
Motion is a motion and a second. Comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries.
Item 5.21 is the grants and donation report. Are there any comments or questions on the grants and donation report? Hearing none, we'll move to 5.22. This is the approval to construct outdoor classroom at South Elementary. This is a request to approve Lions Recreation to construct an outdoor classroom at South Elementary. PV Education Foundation has awarded $10,000 toward the project. South Home and School will provide an additional $23,000 towards the balance of the construction, furniture, and ancillary materials. Recommended action is a motion to approve, and I so move.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries.
Item 5.23, approval of independent consultant agreement. This is a request to improve an independent consultant agreement at a cost not to exceed $5,000. The recommended action is a motion to approve, and I so move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions?
Yeah, could we have a little explanation as to what this is for? Because I really didn't get a good sense from reading the attachment.
I would agree. I was about to ask that same question.
I would just note that it relates to a confidential personnel matter, and if the board requires additional information, I would suggest that we adjourn to a executive session.
Is it the desire of the board to adjourn for exec session to talk deeper about this particular agenda item? Okay. Well, if that is not the case, then if we are all in favor,
And additional information could possibly be provided to the board subsequent to the meeting.
in the memo, okay.
I would be happy with that.
Is that satisfactory, Mr. Fountain? Okay. Noted then, if everyone is comfortable voting for this particular motion and receiving some backup information and context later, I will say all in favor.
Aye.
Against? Motion carries.
And then finally, item 5.24, approval of MCIU agreement for the Southeast Youth Development Center. This is a request to approve a 3-year agreement with MCIU to provide educational programming to the youth assigned to the Southeast Youth Development Center, effective July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2028. The recommended action is a motion to approve, and I so move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions?
Just one comment. We haven't heard much about the Youth Development Center for a while. I'd ask Dr. Russell if you could give us an update in your next superintendent's report, or in a Friday memo, either way.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries.
And that ends section 5.
Wonderful. Payment of bills, section 6, Mr. Liggett.
Thank you. 6.01 is on consent. 6.02 and 03 are asking for the ratification of bills and payroll and the approval of the treasurer's report and financial statements, and I so move.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries.
That concludes my sections.
Mr. Liggett, would you take section 7 as well, please?
Certainly. Section 7.01 through 6 are either on consent or removed from the agenda. Section 7.07 is a request for a motion to approve a memorandum of agreement, and I so move.
Motion and a second. Comments or questions? I will just comment that I appreciate the diligence of administration and the teachers union to come to the agreement. That was acceptable to everyone. And if there are no other questions, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries.
The other 2 sections are on consent. That ends my second section of the night.
Thank you so much, Mr. Liggett. And support personnel, Dr. Campley.
Okay, 8.01 all the way through 8.08 are all on consent. I'm done.
Thank you, Dr. Campley. Mr. Keenan, governance, section 9.
901, we have a first reading on policies. Are there any comments or questions?
Nope.
All right, 9.02, 9.03 are on consent.
That ends your section. Thank you, Mr. Keenan. Brings us to section 10, closing items. Again, we open the floor to the audience for comments on any topic for a duration of 3 minutes. Floor is open. Seeing none, move on to section 10.02, comments from board members. I open the table. Nothing? All right. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Russell. I'm so sorry.
I just want to thank the board for a good school year. It's winding down very quickly. I don't know where May and June went, but really our students seem to have a really good year, more and more getting back on track. Our staff did as well, and I appreciate your governance as part of that, so thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. 10.03, notice
Oh,
of the...
actually,
Oh,
I
I'm
have
so
a comment
sorry,
too. That's
Mr.
right. My
McKinney.
apologies.
No.
But I wanted to also thank the district on their diligence Friday night during graduation with the constant updates in regards to the weather. So it was pretty iffy for a while there. Turned out to be a beautiful night, but yeah. So I actually I was looking forward to them every time. It was like 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. So yes, maybe.
Unless you were a parent, then your heart was like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. But it was a beautiful evening. It was very nice.
Very well set expectations, though. That was excellent. I agree.
I would also like to applaud the graduation. I thought it went really, really well. And I was particularly excited about the fireworks when ITs were announced and the fireworks went off from over
Good
there.
that you felt excited about that. I think everybody else was actually terrified by that noise, but I'm glad that you
thought
were
it was really
glad that you
cool.
were excited about it.
I agree.
I thought our class president was actually going to pass out. She looked that worried by the noise. All right. If there's nothing else, 10.03, notice of video disclaimer. 10.04, adjournment. We did not have an executive session today. Everyone have a wonderful, safe, happy summer.